A beacon of hope, a beacon of possibility, a beacon of relief in a world that needs it more than ever, and a wartime miracle. These were some of the words praising the Black Sea grain deal brokered by Turkey and UN around this time last year. It's now a year later, and word on everyone's lips is worry, as the world confronts a crisis which may involve food prices and security. And some nations even blame Russia for playing Hunger Games.
So I think it ought to be quite clear to everyone in the world right now that Russia is using food as a weapon of war, not just against the Ukrainian people, but against all the people in the world, especially the most underdeveloped countries who depend on grain from the region.
But according to Russian President Putin, it's the West that's perverting the grain deal.
We have been extending this deal time and again, and doing so we showed miracles of restraint and patience, tolerance. We expected that our international colleagues would finally start to fully observe agreed and approved parameters and conditions. However, this was not the case.
Under the Black Sea Grain Initiative, Russia allowed Ukraine to export grain during a time of war. Ships were able to leave several Ukrainian ports through a safe humanitarian corridor from Chornomorsk, Odessa, and Pivdeni to the Black Sea. The ships then arrived at Istanbul Strait while being closely monitored by a joint coordination center containing representatives from the UN, Ukraine, Russia, and Turkey. Following the final checks, the grain was then distributed to the intended destinations in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Ukraine has shipped nearly 33 million tons of grain, oil, and other products since the start of the conflict. The groundbreaking deal has been renewed 3 times since its first signing. Russia withdrew from the grain deal last week, but says the deal can resume again once Kremlin's needs are met.
And finally, the basic condition of Russia's return to the deal is re-establishment of its initial humanitarian essence. If all these conditions are fulfilled, which we previously agreed on, they are not something I have invented now, but as soon as they are fulfilled, we will immediately return to the deal.
Some of these demands are Russia being admitted to the SWIFT banking payment system, the withdrawal of sanctions, and resumption of agricultural machinery exports. It's still unclear if the grain deal will resume under these new conditions. So the world leaders will have to look for alternatives to avoid a potential food crisis. Tulay Kalyon Haznedaroglu, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, Taha Arvas joins me here in the studio. He's an adjunct professor of finance at Boğaziçi University. Good to have you back with us, Taha. Almost immediately after it was announced that Russia would suspend its participation in the grain deal, we saw the prices of grains such as wheat spike. Are we in danger of seeing perhaps another food shortage crisis here?
Yes and no. I think this wasn't a surprise. Russia had warned that it would do this in April if some sanctions weren't removed. So countries that were dependent on these wheat imports made other arrangements. And also the period in when this happened during the harvest season is later than would have been critical. So essentially exports have trickled as it is now. So we're past the point where it would have been an existential problem for the world. So we shouldn't see as big an impact as it could have been. Much worse is the short of it.
So Russia's main argument in pulling out of the deal was that it was essentially one-sided, that pledges to support Russian exports of fertiliser and foodstuffs really didn't materialise. Do you think Moscow has a point here? Because it did seem like that Ukrainian exports really gained the most out of this initiative.
I mean, frankly, we're talking about 2 sides that are at war. So it would only benefit Russia to continue doing this if it had, net overall it benefited from this. So I can see how they would say that, listen, we're at war with Ukraine. We don't want them benefiting much more than we are, and that's really what was happening. But in the meantime, countries like Turkey and China are also benefiting from the import of Ukrainian grain. So does Russia want to appease these countries by continuing this program? At the same time, ironically, the European Union does not want Ukrainian wheat to be exported, because that decreases the price of wheat, whereas its farmers need it to be higher. So everyone has their own benefit here, and they're playing their cards differently.
They sure do. And in response to Russia's announcement, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that he was still optimistic that this grain deal could be revived. He also mentioned that the President Putin would be in Turkey next month. But before that meeting, Erdogan might get on the phone with Putin in order to talk about this deal. Do you think this agreement still can be revived?
I think so. I think despite Russia really saying it's over, we're not going to, it's not a suspension, they say, it's a complete cancellation of the project. I wouldn't be surprised if President Erdogan and Putin came together and figured this out. I mean, both are known for their negotiating, so I think it wouldn't be a surprise if it came back together. And it would benefit both the Ukrainians and the world in general.